This is me after following every single minimalist money rule to a T. One duffel bag of clothes, a completely empty room, a body covered in bedbug bites, and a bank account reading minus $74. Rich guys sitting in sunny coffee shops love to tell you, buy less, find inner peace, and the money will follow. They turn our poverty into some spiritual choice. But what they don't tell you is that for an exhausted, broke kid, extreme minimalism is a death trap. I almost ended up homeless on the streets of New York because I believed them. If you're sitting there skipping lattes and counting your t-shirts while your bank balance is bottoming out, listen to your older brother. You are not a failure. You are just playing a rigged game by someone else's rules. And here is how I actually broke out of the trap. It started 3 months ago. I was working an unpaid internship that promised exposure but paid exactly $0 while trying to stretch $50 a week from a part-time retail gig. I was desperate for control. When you don't know how you're going to pay rent next month, your brain constantly searches for an emergency brake. That's when the video found me. The speaker was calm, his voice wrapped in gentle lo-fi music. He talked about how the average person is enslaved by their possessions. He drew a beautiful comparison between a guy named Mark, who makes 95 grand but spends it all on a fancy car, and a guy named Dave, who makes 52 grand but lives in a peaceful, empty space and saves half his income. It sounded so logical. It sounded like peace. The video told me to apply the 24-hour rule before buying anything, to kill impulse. It told me to calculate the cost per use of every object. It told me to ruthlessly audit my life and get rid of the excess. I sat there in my cramped, noisy apartment, looking at my cheap, mismatched things, and I felt a wave of hope. I thought, this is it. This is why I'm struggling. It's not because the rent is climbing by 15% every year. It's not because my student loan servicer just sent an email saying my deferment period is over and they want $300 a month starting immediately. No, it must be because I'm not disciplined enough. I'm just consuming too much. So I went to war with my own life. I spent a whole weekend packing up my things. I sold my old video game console for pennies on the dollar because the minimalist video said digital entertainment is a distraction from self-actualization. I threw away books, old clothes, kitchen utensils I hadn't used in a month, and an extra set of bed sheets. I felt a strange, intoxicating rush of power every time a trash bag hit the bottom of the chute. Look at me, I thought. I'm living like a monk. I'm mastering my willpower. The rules said that by reducing my physical footprint, I was protecting myself from the hidden costs of ownership, what they called the second cost. They said every object costs you money twice. Once when you buy it, and later when you have to maintain it, store it, and give it your mental energy. That part made so much sense to me. I thought, if I don't own anything, nothing can hurt me. I was so proud of my empty space. I would come home from a grueling 8-hour shift where customers screamed at me over coupons, and I would sit on a cheap plastic folding chair in the middle of my empty room, staring at the white walls, trying to feel enlightened. I thought I had solved the equation. I thought I was finally stable because I had removed the variables. But here's what the textbook philosophers never tell you about the reality of being young and broke in America. The system doesn't care about your inner peace, and it definitely doesn't care about your minimalist aesthetic. The first crack in my beautiful illusion didn't come from a luxury temptation. It didn't come from a sudden urge to buy a high-end espresso machine or a designer jacket. It came from a basic human need. I had been sleeping on a cheap yoga mat on the hardwood floor for 3 weeks because I sold my old lumpy mattress to be minimalist, and my back was screaming. I didn't have $4,000 for a sustainably sourced organic latex mattress like the ones advertised on my favorite podcasts. I had exactly $50 left after paying rent and my minimum credit card payment. So I did what any broke kid does. I opened Facebook Marketplace. I scrolled through hundreds of listings until I found it, a clean-looking second-hand mattress for $45, located just 3 blocks away. The description said it was from a smoke-free, pet-free home. I walked over there, dragged it down 3 flights of stairs, and carried it back to my apartment on my shoulders like a pack mule. I threw it onto my empty floor, collapsed onto it, and thought I was a genius. I had beaten the cost-per-use metric. I had found a shortcut. 4 days later, I woke up with small, burning red welts in neat little rows along my arms and neck. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself it was just stress or a reaction to some cheap laundry detergent. But by the second week, the welts had spread across my back, itching with a fierce, maddening intensity that kept me awake until dawn. One night, I flipped the mattress over with a flashlight. There, hidden deep in the seams, were tiny reddish-brown crawling shapes. Bed bugs. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. The panic that sets in when you realize your sanctuary has been violated by something you cannot easily destroy is suffocating. I didn't have the money for a professional exterminator. I went to the hardware store and spent my last $20 on cheap chemical sprays, coating every inch of the room until the fumes made me dizzy. It didn't work. Within days, the infestation spread through the floorboards. My landlord found out during a routine maintenance check, and he didn't care that I was a tenant trying to live a sustainable life. He sent me a legal notice. Because I had brought the infested item into the building, I was liable for the treatment of the entire line of apartments. The bill was $1,500. If I couldn't pay it within 30 days, eviction proceedings would begin. That was the exact moment the universe decided to pull the rug out from under me completely. I sat there on that toxic, infested floor, my skin crawling, looking at that $1,500 demand, and my phone buzzed. It was an automated notification from my bank. My account balance was minus $74. I couldn't understand it. I hadn't bought anything. I had been living on instant ramen and tap water. I hadn't stepped inside a store in weeks. I pulled up my statement and began to scroll. And that is when I met the hidden army of parasites that had been slowly bleeding me to death while I was busy worrying about physical clutter. Because I was so focused on not buying new shoes or upgrading my phone, I had completely ignored my digital ecosystem. A year ago, back when I had a temporary gig that paid decent money, I had signed up for a bunch of 7-day free trials, a premium productivity app to help me organize my schedule, an advanced AI tool to format my resume, an upgraded cloud storage plan because my phone was full, a streaming service to watch one specific documentary, a gym membership I used twice before the panic attack started. I had forgotten every single one of them, and because they were all linked to my debit card, they had been quietly, ruthlessly processing their monthly fees. $9.99 here, $14.99 there, $29 for a software suite I hadn't opened in 6 months. They didn't care that I was sleeping on a floor with bugs. They didn't care that I was broke. They just kept punching their digital straws into my jugular every 30 days until a couple of those renewals hit simultaneously on a Friday morning, triggering 3 separate $35 overdraft fees from my bank. I was paralyzed. The sheer, crushing weight of it all settled onto my chest until I could barely breathe. The room felt smaller, the white walls closing in on me. I had no physical assets left to sell because I had already sacrificed them to the altar of minimalism. I had no safety net. My father was hundreds of miles away in a small rural town, working himself to the bone just to keep his own house, and I would rather have starved than call him and admit I was failing so badly. I felt a deep, burning resentment bubbling up inside me. I hated the digital world. I hated the banks. But most of all, I hated myself for being so naive. I had believed that if I just controlled my desires, the world would be fair. That night, the final trap snapped shut. It was 2 in the morning. I was exhausted, my skin was itching, and my brain was fried from hours of manic, useless math trying to figure out how to stretch $0 into $1,500. I was emotionally completely spent. When you reach that level of fatigue, your higher cognitive functions, your willpower, your discipline, they don't just weaken, they completely shut down. I opened my phone just to escape the reality of my room. A notification popped up from an online retailer. It was a heavy-lined winter jacket I had looked at 3 months ago when the weather first started getting cold. The notification said, "Flash sale, 80% off for the next 20 minutes, only $45. And right below it, in beautiful, friendly purple text, were the magic words, or 4 interest-free payments of $11.25 with Klarna. Buy now, pay later. My brain, completely starved of dopamine, completely broken by the stress of the eviction notice, didn't see a debt trap. It saw a tiny piece of comfort in a world that felt cold and hostile. I thought to myself, it's just $11. I can find $11 next week. I'm living so minimally anyway. I deserve this one thing. I clicked the button. I didn't just buy the jacket. The algorithm, running on supercomputers designed by some of the smartest minds on Earth, knew exactly what state of mind I was in. It knew that once a broke, exhausted kid breaks his own rules once in the middle of the night, his defenses are entirely gone. It recommended a pair of durable boots on sale for $15 a month. It suggested a thermal shirt for $5 a month. Within 10 minutes, I had checked out 3 times across 2 different buy now, pay later apps. I didn't feel the pain of spending money because no money left my account that night. I just felt a fleeting, pathetic rush of relief. The hangover hit the next morning when the emails started rolling in. I hadn't just spent $45, I had committed myself to a recurring web of micro-debts that were scheduled to hit my account over the next 6 weeks, precisely when I had absolutely no income guaranteed. When the first payments bounced a week later, the apps didn't just politely ask for the money, they handed my accounts over to internal collection systems, slapped on late fees, and reported the delinquencies. My credit score, which I had carefully kept in the high 600s by paying my old credit card on time, plummeted 80 points in a single month. And that was the final nail in the coffin. Because when your credit score drops into the 500s, you don't just look bad to banks, you become radioactive to landlords. The eviction threat from my building was real, and when I tried to look for another cheap studio apartment or even a room in a shared house, every single property manager ran my credit report and immediately rejected my application. I was trapped in a crumbling room with a $1,500 debt I couldn't pay, a negative bank balance, a ruined credit profile, and absolutely no assets left to my name. I was the ultimate minimalist. I had nothing, and it was terrifying. I remember sitting on that bare floor in the middle of the afternoon, watching a single shaft of sunlight move across the dust motes, and a strange cold clarity washed over me. The panic stopped, replaced with a profound sense of disillusionment. I realized that I was fighting the wrong war. The minimalist gurus lied to me, not because their rules were inherently evil, but because they were completely blind to the structure of modern poverty. They treated financial instability as a character flaw, a symptom of greed and poor impulse control. They told me to manage my mindset, while the actual problem is that the economic landscape for anyone under 30 is designed to be a one-way extraction machine. The rules I had been following were defensive plays for people who already had an offense. If you have $10,000 in a savings account, the 24-hour rule is a great way to avoid buying a second television. If you're making $95,000, calculating the cost per use helps you optimize your investment portfolio. But when you're at the bottom, when you're living under the constant threat of a single emergency destroying your life, those rules are a joke. The real threat isn't that you're buying too many things. The real threat is that your survival margins are so thin that any mistake, any low-cost alternative you choose because you can't afford the quality option will carry a massive compounding penalty. It's what I call the poverty premium. It costs an enormous amount of money to be poor in America. You buy the cheap car because you can't afford the reliable one, and then you spend 3 times the car's value in emergency repairs. You buy the cheap mattress because you don't have rent money, and you get hit with a $1,500 exterminator bill. You use the Buy Now, Pay Later app because you don't have $45 today, and you end up destroying your credit score for the next 3 years. I looked at my life and realized that my willpower was never going to save me from an algorithm designed by data scientists to break me down at 2 in the morning. I couldn't outthink the system, and I couldn't out-discipline it. If I wanted to survive, I had to stop playing their game by their rules. I had to build an entirely different machine. The first thing I did was radical, and it went against every piece of polite financial advice I had ever read. I walked down to my bank branch, the one that had charged me over $100 in overdraft fees while my account was negative. I stood in line, my heart pounding against my ribs, and when I got to the teller, I didn't ask for a loan or an extension. I told them I wanted to close my account. The woman behind the glass looked at me like I was crazy. She told me I had to settle the negative balance first. I pulled out $80 in cash that I had earned from doing an odd moving job for a neighbor, handed it to her, and told her to shut it down completely. I walked out of that building with $0, no debit card, and no bank account. I went home, opened my phone, and uninstalled every single banking app, every retail app, every food delivery service, and most importantly, every single Buy Now, Pay Later platform. I deleted my saved autofill credit card information from my browser. I stripped my phone down until it was nothing but a tool for communication and work. If I wanted to buy something, I had to physically walk to a store, look a human being in the eye, and hand over green pieces of paper that I had physically earned. I removed the friction from my savings and put a massive, insurmountable wall of friction in front of my spending. I accepted that my willpower was weak, so I built an environment that didn't require willpower to function. Next came the digital purge, and this was where I had to be absolutely ruthless. I sat down with a notebook and wrote out every single subscription service that had been caking itself onto my life. I didn't care how essential they claimed to be. I called every company, I spent hours on hold, arguing with customer service bots, demanding cancellations. When some of them refused or made it impossible to cancel without a long process, I didn't care because the bank account they were tied to no longer existed. The digital parasites went to bite my jugular and found nothing but cold, dead plastic. I stopped paying for premium cloud storage and manually backed up my files onto an old hard drive I found in my closet. I canceled my music streaming and went back to listening to free radio with ads. I accepted the discomfort. I accepted the annoyance. Every single dollar that used to disappear into the ether every month was now a dollar that stayed in my pocket as physical cash. But the biggest shift was how I handled the eviction notice and the $1,500 bill. I didn't hide from the landlord anymore. I didn't send polite, desperate emails begging for mercy. I walked into the management office, sat down across from the management property, and looked him in the eye. I didn't tell him a sob story. I gave him a cold, hard business proposition. I said, I don't have $1,500 right now. If you try to evict me, it will cost you at least $3,000 in legal fees. It will take 3 months to get me out through the courts, and you will lose 3 months of rent on an apartment that you will then have to spend money to clean and repair anyway. Or we can sign an agreement today where I pay you an extra $150 a month on top of my rent for the next 10 months, and I will personally assist the exterminator when he comes to treat the unit. He looked at me for a long time, evaluating the math. He realized that a broke kid who is organized, calm, and offering a predictable cash flow is a much better asset than an expensive legal battle with an empty room at the end of it. He agreed. We signed the paperwork right there. That was the moment I realized what true financial stability actually means. It is not about owning less than 100 things. It is not about achieving some state of zen where you never want a nice meal or a comfortable pair of shoes. True stability is optionality. It is having enough breathing room, enough margin in your life to look a crisis in the face and negotiate with it from a position of pragmatic strength rather than blind panic. It is having the ability to say no to an abusive boss because you have enough cash in a drawer to buy yourself 2 weeks of time to find another job. It is having the ability to walk away from a toxic living situation because you aren't tied down by a web of micro debts that require every penny of your paycheck just to keep the lights on. I spent the next 6 months in a state of absolute aggressive focus. I didn't focus on saving money by denying myself food. I focused on increasing my raw income while keeping my lifestyle frozen at the absolute floor. I took a second job working night shifts at a warehouse. It was brutal, exhausting work that left my body aching every day. But every single dollar from that job went into a physical envelope marked emergency fund. I didn't buy a single piece of clothing. I didn't go out for drinks. I didn't upgrade anything. But I wasn't doing it because a minimalist video told me it was trendy. I was doing it because I was building a shield. I was buying my freedom back, one $10 bill at a time. By the time the 10 months were up, the $1,500 debt was gone. The mattress had been treated, and eventually, when I could afford it with actual cash, I bought a brand new mid-range bed from a local store that didn't have bugs and didn't require an app to pay for it. I had $3,000 sitting in a physical lockbox under my floorboards. It wasn't earning interest in an index fund, and the financial gurus would probably tell you I was losing money to inflation. But that $3,000 in cash was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. It was 3 months of absolute survival. It was the ability to sleep through the night with my heart racing every time my phone buzzed. It was the realization that I was no longer a prey animal inside the financial machine. I had built a margin. I had created space. If you are writing this right now and you are exhausted, if your skin crawls every time you look at your banking app and you feel like an absolute failure because you can't seem to make the math work, I want you to take a deep breath. Stop looking at the people who have it all figured out on social media. Stop letting them sell you a sanitized, aesthetic version of discipline that is completely decoupled from the reality of your struggle. Your debt is not a sign that you are a bad person. Your struggle is not a sign that you lack willpower. You are simply a human being trying to navigate a system that was explicitly designed to keep you broke, anxious, and compliant. You don't need to live with less stuff to be a better person. You need to build a system that protects your sanity and your cash flow from the people who want to take it from you while you sleep. Close the accounts that bleed you. Delete the apps that tempt you when you are too tired to say no. Face your debts with cold, hard math instead of fear, and understand that every dollar you keep in your possession, every dollar that you refuse to give to a subscription or a buy now, pay later platform is a brick in the wall you are building between yourself and the chaos of the world. We are a tribe of people who have to learn this the hard way, on the ground, in the dark, through mistakes that leave scars. But those scars make you dangerous to a system that relies on your weakness. They make you smart. They make you resilient. If you want to stop running and start building an actual defense, stick around with me. We are going to break down exactly how to rebuild your credit score from the absolute bottom without giving a single dime to a predatory bank, step by step, the real way, in the next conversation. Take care of yourself, look after your margin, and remember that you are in control now.